What will we do with it? Let's go to the Scene Materials, apply this default material, and see what we can do with textures in general. For each channel, for instance, diffuse, glossiness, reflectivity, illumination, normal bump, occlusion, and environment, we can upload a separate texture. Next, we have basic settings for diffuse. Here, we can change the color of the object or the intensity of colors. Reflectivity is a very cool parameter too. The higher its intensity, the higher the object's specularity is, meaning it reflects more details on the surrounding environment. Refraction is a similar parameter, but this is more about how the object refracts the light. Next, we have illumination, which regulates how the object is highlighted. It is useful if you want to use glow or deep glow specifically. It is the plugin that I often use instead of standard glow. Turn on illumination, max it out, and then you'll be able to highlight it in After Effects with deep glow. So let's set the value to 0. Subsurface scattering. In theory, it should work fine, but there is something going on in my kitchen. I won't check since it might be some kind of unholy thing. So subsurface scattering, I've never used it. You can play around with it, but I've never had a project where I used it. Next comes wireframe. Here everything is simple too. It is similar to wireframe in Preview. Here, however, we enable wireframe for the material, so it stays this way. Quite an interesting effect. I hope I'll use it in the future. At least we'll try to. There's also width here, and such standard settings as Fresnel. It makes wireframe less distinguishable closer to the center than it is on the side. You can also increase this parameter like this. It adds some kind of cool computer effect or something. Let's turn it off. Then, we have this massive advanced block, which contains such simple settings as force opacity, alpha threshold, which work if you're already applying a texture. Next, smoothing, visible to camera. All settings here are quite standard, and we'll talk about them like made shadow, made reflection, made alpha later. They are rather useful, so I use them quite often. Let's try to create a simple texture, a very simple one. Now, let me increase ring radius to like this, so you can see the texture better. I'll select a white color here, and let's try to make a simple texture. Very often, I use presets that I have found in various sources. They help a lot. There are so many presets here that you can use them without making them yourself. It saves plenty of time. So let's Google some dirty texture. This one, for example. Save it. Name it texture. And upload it to diffuse or rather to glossiness. Click on None Set and then load texture. Here is the path where we saved it. Click OK. Nothing has changed here. We can see just a little bit of it here. Let's increase the reflectivity parameter, for example, to 100. And you can see we've got these scuffs, but they are not of very high quality. You may notice that they are very blurry. This is done to save your computer's resources. If it is not powerful enough, here is the Draft Textures box. I constantly turn it off to have textures in high quality. Therefore, if you uncheck it, you can see how the texture changes. Like this. It's much cleaner now. Also, let's decrease glossiness. If we reduce it, we'll get our object blurred. It becomes more matte. If we set it to this value, it becomes super matte. Let's leave it somewhat like this. Also, the light is created by default, and by default it is reflected on the object as specular. Thus, we can scale specular up or down. Let's set it to 0 so that it doesn't reflect the light at all. Let's restore specular multiplier settings like this. Next, we have a bunch of different settings. Let's copy this texture to normal bump. If you do not know what normal bump or bump is, I advise you to read about them. They are maps that allow you to create bumps, fake bumps, on the object. Let's decrease the value to about 13. Don't get carried away. And here we've got such a texture. Also, we can play around with the texture's UV mapping settings. I think sphere is the most suitable option here. It wraps the object like this. And we already have such an interesting texture. I don't think I should dwell on the textures much, for it's quite an easy topic to understand. You can just do everything you want and that's it. Just adjust the parameters and get what you need. We have finished with textures so far. We'll talk more about them further. For now, however, I'd like to say a few things about animated textures. Animated textures is a rather interesting topic since you can apply any animated texture here, video for example, and it will be displayed on the object. Let's try to make such a simple texture. Click OK and create a new composition. Name it animated_texture. I'll create some simple animation of a circle. Select Ellipse tool and start drawing. Hold Ctrl and Shift and draw a circle like this. I'll enlarge stroke to about this value and remove fill. And let's animate the circle scale. Press S, create the first keyframe and set it to 0. Move forward for about 2 seconds and increase it until it exceeds the boundaries of the screen. Now, it looks like this. Let's make these keyframes smooth with motion tools from Motion Design School. Move this slider for the selected keyframes, and we've got such a smooth animation. Use Alt plus closing square bracket to trim this layer and duplicate it several times. Then, move it in the timeline to get this kind of animation. Fine. Let's make it all white, I guess. No, let's select this color. I like it for some reason. I don't know why. Let's add our animated_texture to the composition which contains element 3D. Drag it down, uncheck it straight away, and get to Custom Layers, Custom Texture Maps in Element 3D. Select animated_texture as layer 1. That's it. We've uploaded it to our element. Now we can select it in element itself. Click Scene Setup. In Diffuse, in the textures we've already created, click here. Make sure to click on the arrow, not on the load texture. Let's select Custom Layer 1, animated_texture, and click OK. Well, here we can see anything. But believe me, something is already going on. Let's reduce intensity of reflectivity to 0. And in Illumination, check the Use Diffuse color box and increase intensity. Now illumination will load our texture from diffuse, and the glow will be the same as in diffuse color. Raise intensity of illumination to about 200, click OK, and you'll see that we've got such a cool animation here. Let's create new camera, manipulate the object and see what we've got. Quite a cool animation we've created. You can see it is duplicated 4 times. We can fix this. Select the object and texture mapping is set to sphere at the moment. We can set UV repeat to 1 and 1 so that the texture is duplicated only once on all axes. Let's try box. Box won't do it. Box repeat neither. Cylinder, plane XY, plane YZ. Click OK. And now we have a different animation. You can experiment with these things, changing stuff depending on what you need. Let's say you selected UV here. And if you apply glow or deep glow to it, you can get rather good animations with interesting effects, as you can see. Besides, we can use this animated underscore texture as an environment. Go to Scene Setup and click Environment. Here, by default, such an environment map is created. Here we can upload our animated underscore texture. Also, check the environment box here to display the background. Click OK. And now you can see that the object's texture is not only animated on the object itself, but reflects environment as well. And we have our animated underscore texture as environment. This gives us a huge space for creativity, where one can create an enormous number of all kinds of effects like glow, reflection, and textures like this one. Again, this is all a matter of experimentation and practice. Do not disconnect yet, I'll show you something else. I will show you bump, but on a better example, so that you'll clearly understand everything and will be able to keep moving forward. Let me show you. Bump is a very interesting tool. I'll demonstrate it by an example. Here I have a texture from the Pro_Shaders_2 pack, and here are diffuse, glossiness, as well as a preloaded material in normal bump. This is how it looks. It is set to 0 at the moment, and a texture on the object is flat. But if we raise this parameter, you'll notice bumps appearing on our object. Some kind of light-based reflection shadow here. While the light is shining somewhere from that direction, you can see specular and shadow is generated on the sides. If we decrease normal bump to 0, we'll get just a flat texture. Therefore, experiment with bump and you can try different textures. This is a good example. Here we have bump set to 0. Now, we raise this parameter and you can already see such interesting bulges. There is a wide variety of various free and paid resources from which you can download the textures you want. Like metal textures, asphalt textures, various scuffs textures, and so on.